Velria stood inside the cold, bright room of Medbay 9. She had been working on the orbital medical ship Carolan for over 5 years. In that time, she had treated dozens of species, from gas breathers to silicon-skinned giants. But this was her first time treating a human, and things were already strange. The human soldier was brought in unconscious after being rescued from a battlefield on the outer moon of Draxel 7. His name, according to his data chip, was Ethan Cole, mid-30s, Terran male, injured during a plasma explosion. He had a fractured rib, a deep burn across his side, and his left arm was temporarily paralyzed. But those weren't the problems that caught Velria's attention. She stared at the bioscan hovering over the bed. There was a large heat signature forming between the human's legs. It was glowing red on the scan, showing increased blood flow and cellular activity. Inflammation detected, the medical AI announced calmly. Possible internal bleeding or parasitic swelling. Velria frowned, her greenish skin shifting slightly as concern filled her face. She looked down at Ethan, who remained unconscious, his chest rising slowly under the sheet. This wasn't just a small reaction. The numbers were increasing. Could it be a reproductive tumor? She asked the AI. Unknown, the AI responded. Human reproductive biology not fully cataloged. That made Velria pause. Humans were still new to the galactic system. Only a few medical files had been shared by Earth, and most of them were vague or incomplete. She had no choice but to perform a physical inspection. Her 3 fingers gently pulled back the sheet. Then she froze. The heat source was not from an infection. It was something else, erect, warm, and pulsing slightly. The human's organs stood upright, like a weapon ready to fire. Velria stepped back instantly, nearly dropping the scanner. She stared at the thing like it might explode. A low groan escaped. The patient Ethan's eyes blinked open slowly, confused, dazed. Then he saw her wide-eyed, stiff, and holding a medical tool like a weapon. "What's wrong?" he croaked, voice dry. Velria didn't answer right away. She pointed to the scan, her voice shaking. "You have a dangerous swelling between your legs." Ethan blinked twice, then realized what she meant. His face turned red almost instantly. "Oh God, that's not tea. That's not dangerous," he stammered. Velria tilted her head, her antenna twitching. "Not dangerous? But your temperature is rising, blood pressure increasing in localized tissue. The organ is expanding." Ethan covered his face with one hand and groaned again, this time in embarrassment. "It's not a wound, nurse, I swear," he said. "It's just ... a reaction." Velria frowned deeper. "To what? Did something bite you there? Is this a reflex of trauma?" "No," he replied, laughing nervously. "It happens sometimes when we sleep, or when we feel things." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of things?" Ethan hesitated, then whispered, "Attraction." The silence between them could have sucked the oxygen out of the room. Velria didn't understand. Her species didn't have organs that changed size due to emotions. Reproduction, for her kind, was calm, clinical, controlled by hormone triggers and scheduling. This was wild, unpredictable, and somehow very human. "I must report this," she said finally. Voice stiff, Ethan sat up slowly, wincing as his ribs ached. "Please don't," he said, his voice soft but serious. "I've already been poked, scanned and judged by everyone here. I just want one person to treat me like I'm not a monster." Velria stopped. Something about his words struck her. She looked at him, not just as a patient, but as someone lost, injured, and alone. Was this why humans were feared? Or was this why they were fascinating? Their bodies acted without warning. Driven by instinct and emotion, it was confusing, but also strangely alive. She put down the scanner slowly. "I will monitor the inflammation," she said carefully. "If it grows further, we will reevaluate." Ethan chuckled. Trust me, nurse. This is the most awkward moment of my life. Valeria turned away quickly, her skin slightly darkening with embarrassment. Then perhaps you should avoid arousing your symptoms, she said. He laughed again, and the sound surprised hurt was warm, deep, and honest. As she left the room, her heart was racing slightly. Not from fear, not from duty, but from curiosity. What exactly was this human doing to her calm, ordered world? Valeria couldn't sleep that cycle. Her mind kept returning to the human patient Tithon. The strange reaction, the biological spike, the way his face turned red when she called it a swelling. She had read hundreds of species files, studied galactic biology since she was a child. But nothing in her training prepared her for this. She stood in front of the medical database, scrolling through old Earth files. Many sections where locked Earth authorities had not shared their full reproductive data with the Galactic Council. Classified, the screen kept blinking. Again and again. Valeria leaned back, rubbing her temples. How was she supposed to help a patient when half his biology was a mystery? In the next room, Ethan rested quietly, still recovering from his injuries. But Valeria couldn't stop thinking about that heat signature. It was not just medical curiosity anymore. There was something else, something she didn't understand. Was it attraction? Why did his body react like that? She finally called for backup, a senior physician named Dr. Tharvin. A large insectoid alien with glowing compound eyes entered Medbay 9. What seems to be the issue? He asked. Valeria explained the swelling, the heat scan, and Ethan's explanation. Dr. Tharvin tilted his head, clicking his mandibles. This might be a reproductive flare, he said. Happens in many species, but human ones sound ... intense. He said it wasn't dangerous, Valeria replied, but I worry it could affect treatment. Dr. Tharvin shrugged. He is stable. Yes. No infection, no internal bleeding. Yes, she nodded. Then treat the rest, he said simply. Leave their strange customs for their own kind. But Valeria wasn't satisfied. She returned to Ethan's room, carrying a new set of scans. Ethan looked up and smiled. Back to check the dangerous condition, nurse. She ignored his teasing and placed the scanner beside him. This is a new thermal analyzer, she said. It will measure temperature patterns in real time. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Still worried it's a parasite. Valeria sat down beside the bed, her long fingers folded neatly. I don't like gaps in knowledge, she said softly. Especially not inside my medbay. Ethan nodded slowly. All right, I'll help. But you'll have to understand something. First, he leaned forward, wincing a little from his side wound. What you said wasn't an infection, nurse. It was a reaction. A physical response to attraction. Valeria blinked. You were attracted to me. Ethan turned red again, looking down at his blanket. Well, not exactly planned, but yes, kind of. She stared at him for a long moment, trying to process. Her species didn't get aroused by looking at someone. They didn't have random chemical floods or swelling reactions. Everything was scheduled, controlled, biological. I don't understand, she said honestly. How can your body betray you like that? Ethan laughed gently. We humans don't think it's betrayal. It's just ... How we are. He paused, then added, we're emotional creatures. Nurse Valeria. Sometimes our hearts and bodies don't wait for permission. She looked away, uncomfortable with how his words made her chest feel tight. There was no infection, no wound, yet she felt something growing to end. It wasn't on the scanner. I will note the reaction as stable, she said finally, standing up. But I also recommend you keep your thoughts controlled. Ethan smirked. Easier said than done, especially with a nurse like you. Valeria's skin flushed a shade darker. She turned sharply and exited the room. But this time, her steps were unsteady. Later that day, Valeria entered the observation lab. She pulled up a private message to the Earth ambassador. Subject: Request for expanded human reproductive data. Medical purpose only. She hesitated for a long time before clicking send. Would they think she was curious? Inappropriate. No, this was for medical safety, she told herself. Nothing more. Back in Medbay 9, Ethan was sketching something on a digital pad. When Valeria returned, she noticed the screen he had drawn her, with long, gentle eyes and her medical badge shining. Is that me? She asked, surprised. Ethan quickly turned the screen off. Just passing time. She didn't push him, but her throat tightened again. He was strange, confusing, unpredictable, but something about him made her want to return to his side. Again and again, she told herself it was professional duty. But her heartbeat said otherwise, and deep down, she knew this was not a wound. But it was definitely going to leave a mark on her life. Valeria stood by the observation window, staring into the dark space beyond. She had watched stars all her life, but never before had they felt so distant. Her thoughts kept drifting back to one room, Medbay 9, where the human lay, Ethan's face, his words, and even his drawings replayed in her mind like a soft hum. This was no longer just about medical data. Something inside her was changing. She held her fingers together, remembering how close she had been to him, how warm his skin felt, how his eyes looked directly into hers. No fear, no barrier. It was strange, uncomfortable, yet somehow beautiful. She had treated hundreds of patients before, but none had left this kind of feeling in her chest. This wasn't training. This wasn't protocol. Was it curiosity? Or something deeper? She turned sharply as the medical AI pinged. Patient Cole requests your presence in Medbay 9, it said politely. Valeria straightened her coat and headed down the corridor. With every step, she told herself this was just a routine checkup, but her heartbeat said otherwise. When she entered, Ethan smiled, sitting up with a blanket across his lap. You look tired, Nurse Valeria, he said gently. She ignored the comment and began checking his vitals. You called for me? She asked, voice cool but not cold. Yeah, he said, holding out the digital pad. I've been trying to learn more about your people, but there's not much info on Zyar biology either. Valeria blinked, surprised. Most aliens didn't care to understand her kind. Even among doctors, Zyari were known to be distant, emotionless, efficient. Why do you want to know about my species? She asked. Because I want to understand you, he said. Not just the nurse who scans me, but the person behind the scanner. Her chest tightened again. No one had ever asked about her, not her likes, not her dreams, not her feelings. Not even during her bonding season had anyone cared to know her thoughts. She sat down slowly on the chair beside his bed. You want to know about me? She said softly. Then let's trade. She pulled out her datapad and began typing. One question from you, one from me, she said. Ethan grinned. Fair deal, he started. Why do Zyari not show emotions? We do, she replied. But it is hidden under layers of control. We believe emotions must not disturb logic. Then she asked, why do humans risk death for love? Ethan chuckled. Because sometimes love is more important than life. Even if it doesn't make sense, the questions continued about food, music, pain, childhood. Each answer brought them closer. Not physically, but emotionally. Valeria found herself laughing, something she rarely did. And Ethan watched her like she was the most fascinating thing in the galaxy. Then he asked something unexpected. Have you ever been touched like this? He reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. Not forceful, not possessive, just warmth and presence. Valeria froze. Her breath caught in her throat. No one had touched her like that, not in curiosity, but in care. She whispered, we don't do this. I know, Ethan said, pulling his hand back slowly. I'm sorry. But she didn't let go. Her hand stayed there for a moment longer, before she slowly moved it away. There's something dangerous. About this, she said, not because it's wrong, but because I don't know what it means. Ethan looked at her with a calm expression. Then let's figure it out together, he said. She stood up quickly, trying to regain her balance. I must return to my duties, she said, though her voice cracked slightly. Of course, Ethan nodded. Thank you, Nurse Valeria, as she walked out. Her fingers still tingled where his skin had touched hers. She should have reported the interaction. She should have erased the entire memory, but instead, she went back to her room and stared. At her reflection, for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like just a healer. She felt seen in the background. The AI assistant silently recorded rising hormonal changes in Valeria's system, heart rate elevated, skin temperature increased. And one more line quietly blinked, emotional imprint forming. Subject, Ethan Colshay. Didn't know yet, but something far more complex than any alien disease had begun inside her. And it wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something dangerously close to desire. The lights in the corridor dimmed to a soft blue. It was night cycle aboard the orbital med ship, Caroline. Most staff were either asleep or logged off for rest, but in Med Bay 9. Nurse Valeria had requested to remain on duty, she told herself. It was for observation purposes, but deep inside, she knew the truth was more complicated. Ethan was still recovering, though stable. His wounds were healing faster than expected, but he still needed monitoring, and Valeria volunteered no. Insisted to take the night shift herself. She sat beside his bed with a tablet in hand, but her eyes weren't on the screen, they were on him. Ethan lay with one arm resting over his head, the other gently placed over his chest. His breathing was steady, his face calm. A tiny frown appeared on his forehead as he turned in his sleep. Valeria tilted her head, observing humans were expressive, even in sleep. Their emotions showed. She leaned forward slightly. Watching the soft rise and fall of his chest, her scanner beeped quietly, indicating elevated neural activity. He was dreaming. She reached out and touched the side of the scanner, trying not to disturb him, but as she did, his eyes suddenly fluttered open. Oh hey, Ethan said groggily, blinking. Valeria froze, her hand still hovering near him. I didn't mean to wake you, she said quickly. You? Didn't. He replied with a sleepy smile. Just a weird dream. That's all, she nodded slowly. Her fingers pulling back as she tried to hide the heat rising through her skin. Ethan sat up slightly, wincing a little. Still hurts, he muttered. Rubbing his ribs, Valeria stood and activated a mild pain reducer on the wall console. You should rest more, she said softly. Ethan looked at her and said, so should you. You've been watching me like a hawk. Her eyes widened slightly. It is protocol. He smiled again. Is it protocol to sit 3 hours without? Blinking. Valeria looked away, flustered. I was analyzing data. She said quickly. Ethan chuckled. I believe you, he said. But I also think you care. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And if I do? Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious now. Then that makes you more human than you think. Valeria didn't know how to reply. Her species trained emotion out of their system. Attachment was discouraged, and romantic bonding only happened once every few cycles. But here she was, in a dark room with a human, heart racing like a storm. She wasn't following medical protocol anymore. She was following feeling. A sudden flicker interrupted the moment. The lights in medbay blinked once, then again. Then they shut off completely, plunging the room into darkness. Power drop detected. The AI said calmly, switching to backup. Systems, a red emergency light glowed dimly from the wall. Casting the room in a soft, pulsing hue, Valeria moved closer to the emergency panel. This shouldn't happen, she muttered. Tapping on the screen, Ethan tried to sit up fully, but groaned in pain. You need help? He asked. She nodded. Stay there, I'll fix it, as she worked. The medbay felt suddenly smaller, more intimate. The red light danced across her face. Her hands, her back. Ethan watched her in silence for a while, then spoke. You know? You're different when it's quiet. She turned her head slightly. Different how? Calmer, he said, softer. Like you're not hiding. Valria paused, her fingers resting on the control panel. I don't know how to not hide, she whispered. Ethan reached out his hand in the dim light, not touching her, just offering you don't have to tonight, he said gently. She hesitated, then slowly turned around, walking back toward his bed. He moved over a little, making space on the edge. She sat down carefully, cautiously, but didn't pull away when their arms brushed. I don't understand what this is, she admitted. It's not in any medical file. It's called connection, Ethan said softly, and sometimes it's the only cure. We have. The silence between them grew warm instead of cold. Their shoulders touched again, and this time, Valria didn't move. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the steady hum of the emergency systems. It was the first time in years she allowed herself to feel without analyzing, without calculating. Just feel. When the lights finally flickered back to normal, she stood quickly. Reality returned like a wave crashing through glass. She picked up her tablet, cleared her throat, and said, "Vitals normal. You should rest now." Ethan simply nodded, a gentle look in his eyes. "Good night, Valria," he whispered. She turned toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, voice softer than a breath. And as she walked out into the corridor, one thought echoed. Inside her, whatever this was, it wasn't medical, but it was real and growing. Valria stood inside the supervisor's chamber, her back straight, her eyes focused on the large circular screen in front of her. 3 holographic figures floated in the air, senior medical officials from the Zyari Central Health Council. Their faces were unreadable, cold, and formal. She had been summoned without warning, and now she knew why. Nurse Valria. The center figure spoke, voice sharp and mechanical. "We have reviewed your behavioral logs and personal medical reports." Valria kept her voice calm. "I have followed all treatment protocols for patient Ethan Cole." "Your emotional readings say otherwise," the left figure replied. "The human is not just your patient anymore," said the third. "We sense a breach of detachment." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell them they were wrong. But her silence said everything. The quiet in the room felt like chains wrapping. Around her, the council's voice returned, this time colder. "You are hereby ordered to transfer the human to a different medical unit at once." Valria's breath caught. "Transfer," she repeated softly. "Yes," the lead figure replied. "To prevent further emotional corruption, he will be relocated to a neutral care zone." "You cannot," she whispered. "It is done." The figure said, "The order is final." The screen blinked off. She stood alone in the dim room, her thoughts spinning. The walls felt closer than before, like they were watching her. She clenched her fingers around her medical tablet and stormed out. Ethan was humming when she entered Medbay 9. He had just finished cleaning his small sketchboard, his smile bright as always. But that smile faded the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" he asked, his voice instantly serious. Valria didn't speak at first. She simply handed him a small digital card. He looked down and read the transfer order. Then he looked back up at her. "You didn't want this, did you?" She shook her head, eyes burning. "I was ordered," she said quietly. "They think I'm becoming compromised." Ethan stood slowly, ignoring the discomfort in his ribs. "Do you feel compromised?" he asked. Valria looked at him for a long time. "No," she said, "but I feel human. And they fear that more than any disease." He smiled gently, walking closer to her. "I won't fight the order," he said. She looked surprised. "But he continued, I won't make things harder for you. Valria, he took her hand, the same one he had drawn days ago, and pressed something inside it. She opened her palm and found a small flower, dried, faded, and earth-grown. I was saving it for the right moment, he said. I guess this. Is it? Valria stared at the delicate brown petals. She had seen so many strange things in her career: plasma infections, brain burns, collapsing lungs, but never had something so simple made her heart ache like this. Thank you, she whispered. He gave her one last smile and walked toward the prep zone to pack. Each step he took felt heavier than the one before. That night, Valria sat alone in her room, the flower placed beside her scanner. She kept replaying the transfer order. The council's words echoed in her head. Emotional corruption, breach of detachment. But what if that breach had saved her? What if Ethan had brought something back to her that she didn't know was missing? She looked at the time. Only 2 hours left before his transfer shuttle arrived. She stood, heart pounding. Her feet carried her to the terminal without thinking. She opened a private communication channel and typed in a sequence. Code override. Request transfer delay reason. Medical risk assessment status. Pending approval. She waited 10 seconds. 30 seconds, a full minute. The screen blinked. Request denied. She closed her eyes. Then opened another panel. This time she accessed the emergency override protocols. Level 3 security clearance required. She hesitated, then entered her personal ID and inserted the medical chief's stolen access key. The system unlocked. Emergency override confirmed. Sat on the edge of the departure bench, holding his sketchpad one last time. The guards were already preparing his files. He was quiet, resigned, but then the sirens rang. Transfer protocol canceled. The AI voice announced, Subject Ethan Cole to remain in Medbay 9 for emergency medical reason. The guards looked confused. Ethan stood up in shock, and then she walked in Valria, breathing hard, face flushed. You're not going, she said. Why? He whispered. She stepped closer, placing her hand on his chest. Because I'm not ready to lose what I just found. The guards received new orders from above, certain and delayed. But Ethan didn't care. He reached for her hand and held it tightly. There were consequences coming, maybe punishment, maybe worse. But at that moment, only one truth mattered. She chose him, and even in a galaxy filled with rules. That choice was louder than all the silence in space. The ship, Caroline, was silent. In the orbit above the dead moon of Draxel 7, most of the crew had returned to their normal duties after the aborted transfer, but Valria's mind was far from normal. She had committed something few Ziari ever dared, breaking a direct order. Now she waited, knowing consequences were near. Inside Medbay 9, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. Watching her from a distance, his ribs had mostly healed. The burns were fading, but he hadn't left. Valria kept finding reasons to keep him under observation. Muscle scans, reflex checks, emotional stability tests. But they both knew none of those were the real reason he was still there. Then it happened. An alert suddenly blared through the walls. Code red: biovirus contamination detected in ship systems. The AI voice rang out. All medbays enter lockdown. Emergency protocol engaged. Valria jumped to her feet, running toward the main scanner console. Ethan followed her, eyes wide. What's going on? He asked. Valria's fingers danced. Across the screen, there's a virus spreading through the neural link grid, affecting all AI-connected systems. Ethan blinked. What kind of virus? Biocode-based, not natural, she said. It's man-made, weaponized. Doors sealed across the medbay with metallic clanks. Warning lights flashed red, casting their faces in a blood-like glow. The whole ship runs on AI-linked systems. She muttered, if the virus reaches the medcore, life support and navigation will collapse. The ship shook slightly. a low hum building in the floor. Velria's skin flushed dark green in panic. "I have to isolate the core manually," she said. She turned toward the medical console, entering commands rapidly. But the screen blinked backsays, blocked. "It's not letting me in," she whispered. "My clearance has been suspended since I broke protocol." Her heart dropped. Her rank was frozen, her authority gone. She looked at Ethan, then back at the red lights. "Ethan," she said suddenly. "You're not connected to the neural grid?" "What?" he asked. "You're not part of the system," she repeated. "The virus can't infect you, you mean?" He started, then understood. "You want me to go in?" Velria nodded, eyes firm. "You'll have to manually reach the control spine and restart the ship's internal firewall." He exhaled deeply. "I'm not trained for that." "You don't need training," she said. "You just need to move fast, to trust me." She led him through a side passage behind Medbay 9. A hidden maintenance tunnel that ran along the central spine of the ship. Sparks flew from broken wires above, and smoke filled the air in places. Velria handed Ethan a sealed suit and a small datapad. "This will show you the sequence," she said. He took it, his fingers brushing hers again. "If I don't make it back," he started. "You will," she interrupted, voice shaking slightly. "I can't lose you now." He gave her a nod, then climbed into the tunnel. Velria watched until his silhouette disappeared into the darkness. Then she returned to Medbay 9 and locked herself in. The virus had reached the second-tier lab. Equipment was sparking, AI voices glitching. She could do nothing now, only wait inside the spine. Ethan crawled through narrow metal tubes filled with heat and static energy. Alarms screamed in his ears and pressure valves burst above his head. He followed the datapad's blinking lights, his heart pounding. This wasn't war, but it felt like a battlefield. At the far end, he found the firewall panel sparking violently, code spinning. Out of control, he reached into the exposed wiring and screamed as electricity burned his gloves. His vision blurred, but he kept going. He entered the override sequence 3 numbers at a time. Matching the diagram Velria gave him, a bright flash blinded him for a second. Then silence. He blinked, confused. Then the lights around him turned white again. In Medbay 9, Velria saw the screens return to normal. System stabilized, the AI said calmly. Biovirus neutralized, ship integrity restored. She gasped and sprinted toward the access tunnel. "Ethan?" she called. No answer. Her hands trembled as she pried the hatch open. She found him lying at the edge of the tunnel, smoke rising from his suit. "Ethan!" she cried again, pulling him out. He groaned softly, his face pale. "But breathing, did I do it?" he asked weakly. She hugged him, pressing her face to his shoulder. "You did," she whispered. "You saved us all later." As the med team arrived and scanned the ship, the senior AI system updated the records. Heroic action, human Ethan Cole, risk level, exceptional, medical status, stabilizing. Emotional link detected with Officer Velriash, sat beside him once again, just like she always did, only now. The space between them was gone. He had risked everything for them, for her, and in return, she had broken every rule to protect him. This was no longer a story of curiosity. It had become something much deeper, a connection forged not by medicine, but by courage, trust, and something neither of them fully understood. Stars drifted quietly outside the window of Medbay 9, but inside, everything had changed. Ethan lay on the recovery bed, wrapped in soft medical cloth, his breathing steady. The bruises and burns from the override incident were healing fast. Yet something deeper had begun to heal inside him, something even he didn't fully understand. Velria sat beside him, not as a nurse, not as a duty-bound Sci, but simply as Velria. Her fingers hovered above his hand for a second before she finally placed them on his gently. His skin was warm, her own hand cooler by comparison, yet the contact felt like fire. "You look better," she said softly. Ethan chuckled weakly. "I feel like I got kissed by a power cable." She smiled, eyes flickering with emotion. "You almost died," she whispered. "But I didn't," he said, "because you trusted me." Velria nodded slowly, but then looked away. "You shouldn't have been in danger at all," she said. "I broke every protocol. I disobeyed the council." Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "Would you take it back?" he asked. She looked into his eyes, then shook her head. "No," she whispered. "Not a single moment." For the first time, the air between them wasn't filled with questions. There was no more confusion, no awkward fear of misunderstanding. There was only clarity. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, "about going back to Earth." Velria's grip on his hand tensed slightly. "I understand," she said, trying to sound professional. "I mean, this place, it's not safe anymore," Ethan added. "For me or for you." He sat up, ignoring the sting in his side. "And I don't want to leave you behind." Velria blinked, surprised. "I thought you'd leave without looking back," she admitted. "I thought humans didn't stay once their mission was done." "I'm not done," Ethan said firmly. "My mission now is you." She stared at him in silence, her mind spinning. No one had ever chosen her like that. Not her colleagues, not her family, not even the medical system she gave her life to. But this human, this unpredictable, reckless, kind-hearted man looked at her like she mattered more than the stars. "I don't know how to be anything but a nurse," she said honestly. Ethan smiled. "Then be a nurse with a heart." She let out a small breath, part laugh, part sigh. "And where would we go?" she asked. Ethan grinned. "Wherever your people don't have scanners and my people don't ask too many questions." They both laughed, and for the first time. It wasn't awkward. It was natural. It was real. A few cycles later, Velria stood before the council again, this time through secure transmission. "We've reviewed your actions," the cold voice said. "You violated procedures and initiated unauthorized overrides." "Yes," Velria replied calmly, "but you also prevented a mass AI collapse," the voice continued, "and allowed a human to save an entire medical vessel." There was a long silence. "Then, your suspension is lifted, but you are no longer fit to serve as a detached medic. We are reassigning your status as independent medical When I resigning medical abtiscates, medicators. It lies on Spaldnaz, my last, Mullo siding. Why splide last K? Then your suspension is lifted. My lawsate is Cerberus. My last, my said, my lad, my said, it is XAs, with XA, by we is it, we I add, they are it go it is it, Kalisik ka I have I kilinis sake you can I salites, sixted by I because it it's a titipalimes tupik disc and the two wees and statistic Explorer Velria didn't argue. She only asked one question. Will Ethan Cole be allowed to accompany me? Another silence followed. Then the reply came. If he is willing to sign away responsibility. Yes. Weeks later, a small transport ship departed from the outer Zyar station. Inside, Ethan adjusted the controls while Velria secured the medical crates in the back. This ship is slower than a limping snail, Ethan complained. But it's ours, Velria replied with a smirk. He turned to look at her. You really meant it, huh? He said, you're ready to travel the galaxy with a man who once scared you with his biology. Velria laughed gently, your body confused. Me? Yes, but your heart. That's what changed me. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly and found the same small, dry earth flower preserved carefully between layers of fabric. "You kept it?" she asked, touched. "I couldn't let go of the moment it gave me hope," he said. "I thought it was just a gift." "No," Ethan replied. "It was a promise." She leaned forward, resting her forehead gently against his again. No scanners, no readings, no warnings. Just warmth as their ship vanished into deep space. The Caroline station logged a final entry. Subject, Nurse Velria, resigned. Subject, Ethan Cole, discharged from medical custody. Reason, cross-species. Emotional bond, status, no longer inflamed by illness, but by something far more human. And for the first time, Velria wasn't afraid of what she didn't understand, because this wasn't disease. This was discovery, and she was ready. D.